This happened 3 years ago, but I don't think I'll ever forget what happened. I'd been going to the same isolated part of the forest for years, a deep eastern section where hardly anybody ever went. The remoteness was exactly what I needed after long and grueling weeks in the city. Same gravel parking spot, same 40-minute hike through thick trees to reach a little clearing. It's maybe 20 feet across, surrounded by these massive oaks and maples. There's an old fire ring someone built years ago, though I'd never seen any recent signs of other campers. That weekend started exactly like all my other trips. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and as the sun went down, I got a nice fire going. I was just settling in with a book when I heard them. Voices. Two people talking somewhere out in the trees. At first, I was just annoyed. I mean, this was supposed to be my quiet weekend, you know? But as I listened closer, something felt off about the conversation. They were talking at a normal volume, but I couldn't quite make out what they were saying. The weird part was how the voices seemed to be moving in a circle around my campsite. For about 20 minutes, they just kept talking, never getting closer, never moving away. Just this constant chatter from somewhere beyond the tree line. Then suddenly, dead silence. I waited, listening for footsteps or tent zippers, any normal camping sounds. Nothing. Even the usual forest noises had stopped. It was like someone had hit a mute button on the entire woods. I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the edge of the clearing, called out something friendly. You know, like, "Hey, I'm just another camper. Do you guys need anything?" My voice sounded weird, echoing through the trees. No answer. I tried calling out again, louder this time. Still nothing. So I went back to my fire and tried to read, but I couldn't concentrate. Something about those voices was bugging me, and I couldn't figure out what. It wasn't until I was getting ready for bed that it hit me. During those 20 minutes of conversation, there had been no pauses. None. It was like two people talking at the exact same time, never stopping to listen to each other, never taking turns. That's not how people actually talk. I crawled into my sleeping bag with that thought messing with my head. Kept telling myself I was probably too far away to hear it properly. But I had trouble sleeping. Kept feeling like something was watching me through the tent walls. I woke up around 5 in the morning to the sound of my own voice. For a second, I thought maybe I'd been talking in my sleep. But as I lay there listening, I realized someone was playing back exactly what I'd said the night before. My friendly greeting to those other campers, word for word, in my exact voice. The sound was coming from different directions, like speakers hidden in the trees around my campsite. Perfect recordings of my voice, capturing every inflection. I fumbled for my flashlight with shaking hands and unzipped my tent. It was still dark out, just the faintest hint of dawn creeping in. I swept my light across the tree line, looking for any sign of equipment or people. Nothing there. But then the playback changed. Now it was playing those voices from the night before, the same overlapping conversation, and underneath it, barely audible, I could hear my own breathing from when I'd been listening by the campfire. Someone had been close enough to record me without me knowing. I didn't waste time packing properly. Just stuffed everything into my backpack as fast as I could, hands trembling the whole time. The recordings kept playing while I worked. Sometimes my voice, sometimes that weird conversation, sometimes sounds I couldn't identify. As I was about to leave the clearing, my flashlight caught something in the dirt that made my stomach drop. Footprints. Dozens of them, arranged in a perfect circle around where my tent had been. All facing inward. All made during the night while I was sleeping. I ran. Didn't even try to follow the trail, just crashed through the woods with my flashlight bouncing everywhere. Behind me, the recordings got louder. It sounded like there were speakers hidden throughout the entire forest, all playing different fragments at once. My voice greeting those campers, that strange conversation, and then something new. The sound of my panicked breathing as I ran, being recorded and played back in real time. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. Didn't stop driving until I was back in the city with all my doors locked. Even now, 3 years later, I still can't explain what the intention of that person or those people were that night. Did they just want to spook me, or were they planning something way worse? I can't shake the feeling that they are still out there in those woods, just waiting for the next person to come along and fall prey. I've never been back to that part of the forest, and I don't think I ever will. I'd been camping solo up in the mountains for 3 days when this whole thing went down. I was sitting by my fire around lunchtime when this guy just walked out of the trees. He looked normal enough, maybe mid-40s, standard hiking gear. He came over with this friendly wave and started explaining how he was looking for some backcountry shelter that was supposed to be around here somewhere. I knew what he meant. There are these old Forest Service cabins scattered throughout these mountains. Most of them are pretty run down, but they'll keep you dry if you need them. During my exploring over the past few days, I'd actually seen what looked like a trail heading deeper into the woods. Figured it probably led to one of those shelters. So I pointed him in the right direction, gave him some basic landmarks to look for. He thanked me and disappeared back into the trees. I went back to my soup and didn't think much more about it. The afternoon was peaceful. I spent time keeping the fire going, just enjoying that mountain quiet you can't get anywhere else. As the sun started dropping behind the peaks, I began prepping what I planned to be my last dinner out there. That's when he came back. I looked up from my camp stove, and there he was, walking across the clearing toward me. But something felt different this time. His whole body language had changed. He told me he couldn't find the shelter, said he spent hours looking, but never even found the trail I'd described. This struck me as odd, because the path was pretty obvious, and my directions had been clear, but I figured maybe he'd just missed it in all the undergrowth. Then he asked if I could show him personally, and said he was getting desperate because he didn't have a tent and really needed that shelter for the night. The whole request made me uncomfortable, but his story seemed believable enough. I mean, nobody wants to spend a night in the mountains without proper shelter. Against my better judgment, I agreed to help him. I grabbed my day pack and led him toward where I'd seen the trail. The walk took about 15 minutes through thick forest. Neither of us talked much, but something about his presence was really bothering me. When we got to the spot, the trail was exactly where I remembered. No way he could have missed it. Even weirder, I could actually see the cabin through the trees, maybe a quarter mile down the path. The place was obviously falling apart, with a sagging roof and broken windows, but it was definitely there. I pointed out both the trail and the cabin, expecting him to thank me and head on his way. Instead, he stared at the building for a long moment, and then said, this wasn't the right shelter. Claimed he was looking for a completely different cabin. This made 0 sense. There weren't multiple shelters in this area, and he'd never mentioned anything specific about which one he needed. I suggested we walk closer to get a better look, hoping to clear up whatever confusion was going on. As we got near the cabin, you could see just how bad of a shape it was in. Windows completely smashed out, wood rotting. The whole thing looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Not exactly the kind of place you'd want to spend the night. I turned to say something about the cabin's condition, and my blood just went cold. The guy had stopped walking and was standing maybe 10 feet behind me. In his right hand, he was holding this big hunting knife. That friendly, helpless act was gone. His face was blank, eyes cold, and when he spoke his voice was flat and emotionless. He told me to go inside the cabin. Every alarm bell in my head was going off. I tried asking what he was doing, what he wanted, but he just repeated his command. His grip on that knife was steady, and everything about his posture suggested he knew exactly how to use it. The cabin behind me was obviously a trap. Once inside, I'd be cornered with nowhere to go. There was maybe 10 feet between us, and while he had the weapon, I still had mobility. I made a split-second decision, dropped my pack, and bolted into the forest. I crashed through the undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes and face, expecting any second to hear him chasing after me. But when I finally looked back, he was still standing in the same spot, watching me run with that same blank expression. I found this dense thicket about a quarter-mile away, and hid there for what felt like hours, listening for any sign that he was coming after me. The forest had gone completely silent, nothing but my own heavy breathing and heart pounding. When I finally worked up the nerve to move, I crept back toward the cabin area, staying hidden in the trees. The guy was gone, but so was my pack. The smart thing would have been to start hiking back to my car immediately, even without supplies, but something pulled me back toward my campsite. Maybe I was hoping he'd left my gear there, or maybe I just needed to see if my safe space had been messed with. As I got close to the meadow, I could see the orange glow of my campfire in the growing darkness. The flames looked way higher than they should have been for a fire I'd banked hours ago. Someone had obviously been feeding it. I moved closer, staying hidden at the edge of the trees. Everything looked normal, except for one thing that made my stomach drop. My day pack was sitting right beside the fire. The trap was obvious, but seeing my gear right there was almost unbearable. My car keys were in that pack. Without them, I was looking at a very long walk back to civilization. Suddenly, the guy stepped out from behind my tent. He casually added more wood to the fire, sending sparks up into the dark sky, then sat down on one of the logs I'd arranged around the fire ring. He just sat there calmly, occasionally poking at the flames with a stick, obviously waiting for me to make a move. That's when it hit me how carefully this had all been planned. He knew I'd come back for my gear. As he hadn't seen me, I decided to sneak away and move back into the darkness. The next several hours I spent hiking through the thick forest, using only my phone as light. I kept looking back, almost expecting to see him, but it seemed like I had gotten away unnoticed. It took until almost dawn, but I finally made it back to the trailhead where my car was parked. The next day I called and made sure that rangers would go back there and investigate, but they found nothing. My complete setup, including the tent, gear, even the stones from the fire ring, were gone, like no one had ever been there. I never heard anything since, but this whole experience has left me deeply disturbed. This happened just last month during a solo backpacking trip through the Appalachian foothills. The trailhead was empty when I arrived that morning, which wasn't surprising given how remote this section was. The first few hours passed without incident as I passed through the thick forest. I was making good time. Around midday, I stopped for a quick snack at a small clearing where the trail crossed a rocky stream. I was sitting on a fallen log, enjoying the sound of water rushing over stones, when something caught my eye. Across the creek, maybe 50 yards away, there was a guy just standing there among the trees, wearing camo pants and carrying what looked like a day pack. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, perfectly still, staring directly at me. When our eyes met, he started to smile. He didn't say anything, didn't gesture, just kept watching me with that unsettling grin. I packed up my stuff quickly and got back on the trail, glancing over my shoulder once to see him still standing in the exact same spot. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just socially awkward or something. The afternoon brought a steady climb through dense forest. By evening, I reached the first designated camping area, a small clearing with a fire ring and a basic pit toilet. I'd planned to push on to the next site, but I was getting tired, and this spot had everything I needed. I was halfway through setting up my tent when I heard footsteps coming down the trail. My stomach dropped when I saw who it was. The same guy from earlier emerged from the tree line like he'd been expecting to find me here. He called out and explained that he was planning to camp here for the night too. The clearing was big enough for multiple tents, and I couldn't exactly tell him he wasn't allowed to stay. But every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong with this guy. At one point, he pulled out an energy bar from his pack and insisted I take it, claiming I looked like I needed better nutrition. The wrapper was already torn open, though no bites had been taken from the bar itself. When I politely declined, he became pushy about it, almost aggressive. His smile never wavered, but there was something cold and calculating in his eyes that made my stomach turn. I told him I had plenty of food and started preparing my dinner, hoping he'd take the hint and give me some space. Instead, he settled down on a log nearby and kept talking. As darkness fell, I made an excuse about needing to call it an early night and retreated to my tent. Through the thin nylon walls, I could hear him moving around the campsite, his footsteps circling my tent at a distance. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by the sound of twigs snapping and leaves rustling just outside my tent. Every time I thought I was imagining things, the sounds would stop for a while, only to resume when I started to relax. It felt like someone was deliberately testing how alert I was, seeing how much they could get away with. Around 3 in the morning, I heard my bear canister being moved. The distinctive sound of the metal container scraping against rocks was unmistakable. I lay perfectly still, listening as someone, undoubtedly my unwelcome camping companion, carefully examined my food storage. When morning came, I packed up as quickly and quietly as possible, hoping to get back on the trail before he woke up. But as I shouldered my pack, I could see him watching me from inside his tent. I started hiking before dawn, pushing myself to put as much distance as possible between us. The trail wound through dense forest for several miles before reaching the next designated camping area. I'd planned to spend another night in the backcountry, but something told me to keep moving. By afternoon, I was exhausted but determined to reach the trailhead. The path descended steadily through a series of switchbacks, offering occasional glimpses of the parking area far below. I was maybe a mile from my car when I heard them, those same deliberate footsteps I'd been hearing for the past day and a half. He'd been following me the entire time, staying just far enough behind to remain out of sight, but close enough to keep track of my movements. I quickened my pace, no longer caring about conserving energy. Behind me, the footsteps matched my rhythm, maintaining that same careful distance. The final stretch to the trailhead felt endless. When I finally reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking as I unlocked the doors and threw my pack into the back seat. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of him in my rearview mirror, standing at the edge of the parking area, still wearing that same unsettling smile. He raised his hand, watching until my car disappeared around a bend in the road. I reported the incident to authorities, but technically, he hadn't done anything illegal. But the memory of those 2 days still haunts me. This was the last time I ever went solo backpacking. Since then, I luckily found a friend who is like-minded, and we haven't had any such incident since. I never learnt if anything came from the report I filed, but I do hope they find him before he actually hurts someone.